Today on Keeping It Real.
We are here with Janice Maxwell, and she is here sharing her story of how when she was 16 years old, she found herself pregnant. So for 5 months, you hid your pregnancy.
Yes.
You're 16 years old.
I'm 16.
And you know that you have to tell your parents because eventually you're going to start showing and it's going to tell you something. And so how was it?
I didn't want to bring my baby home to the life that I'd been living for by the time he was born, was 17 years, with my parents and my dad's alcoholism. I just didn't want to traipse him all over the country, like they had done me.
Kristen Maddox overcame a 12-year addiction. Now she pulls others out knowing that some have escaped death for the last time. Shauna Butler understands the pain of sexual abuse. Now she uses her voice to unhush the little girls inside of women she counsels. This is Keeping It Real.
Good morning. Thank you for tuning in to Keeping It Real. I'm Kristen Maddox.
And I'm Shauna Butler.
And we are so excited about our guest today. She is here all the way from Atlanta, Georgia. Janice Maxwell and I met at your church, actually.
Yes.
And we've got to give a shout out to your pastors.
Yes.
Hello, Pastor Derek and Miss Maggie. We
Yes.
love you. But we instantly made a connection. And the reason is because, first of all, the Holy Spirit, the Spirit of the Lord. But you have such an amazing story, and it just inspired me. And I think we've been trying to get you here now for several months, that you needed to come and share your story on the show. So welcome to Keeping It Real, and thank you for traveling so far to be here with us today.
Thank you. I'm honored to be able to come and tell you what the Lord's done.
Yes. So I know you have a story to tell. Can you just begin by sharing, what was your childhood like? What was it like growing up for you?
Well, I always grew up knowing that God was real, but we weren't in church all the time because my father had an alcoholic problem. Excuse me. And we moved a lot because of that. And I didn't feel stable. I didn't have that. Just first off, everybody comes from we all have broken lives until we know Jesus.
That's right.
And so our family, people use the term dysfunctional, but it's only because we're all just broken people who need the Lord. And we definitely, as a family, needed the Lord in our life. And there was a couple times my mother tried to do that, get us in church. But the most important influence I had as a child was my grandmother, who talked about Jesus all the time, read her Bible all the time, and explained scriptures to me and taught me that prayer was important. And this is an important part of the story, that prayer is very important. So my early childhood was very difficult. I dealt with it a lot by just pretending that I wasn't a part of it. I lived in an imaginary world and made up things. But my sister and I were both, we were moved so many times, we were in 22 different schools. I was in 4 different high schools. So you can imagine how you would not feel grounded, or secure in your life because of that. And at one point, my sister got married and she moved out, and my parents they were always having problems because of the alcoholism. And my mother was always having to, ask him for money and try to get the money from him, And so there was a lot of discord and arguing, and sometimes even a little violence involved, just anger, anger issues, which, I didn't want to be a part of all of that, and I wanted to do what my sister did. I wanted to go get married and leave, But they actually, when she got married, they kind of stopped parenting me, and I was just 16. And you're not ready to not be parented, even at that age. You're not an adult, Right. You may look like you've grown, and you may even seem mature, where your parents think they can trust you. And of course, in my family situation, I was always the good little girl, They never had a problem from me. In their minds, I could be trusted completely. But when you have no guidance from your family, it's easy for the enemy to come in and snare you, and draw you into something you don't want to be a part of. So at 16, I decided that I would get a part-time job. I had access to a car. My mom and dad allowed me to have a car because I was having to drive back and forth to school from a long distance because we'd moved again, and I had refused to change high schools the 5th time. So I was going to finish there. And so I went to work at this fast food place. And I met this guy. And honestly, up until this point in my life, I'd never really been involved with anybody. I didn't have any experience with relationships between boyfriend, girlfriend. That wasn't me. I was always the chubby little girl. And I had actually lost some weight, so I felt good about myself. And he paid attention to me. So early childhood up to that point had been very a struggle, but then I met him, and he began asking for things that I didn't feel comfortable giving. But the cost of not being alone, because I felt so alone. My sister was gone, my parents were gone, my dad was working out of town during the week. And my mom would just go out at night with her friends, and she wouldn't come until 2 or 3 o'clock, but she had no idea where I was or what I was doing. And so I was so alone. The cost of the not being alone became a very high cost. And so I relented and gave in to this boy's, advances. But immediately, what's so awesome about a relationship with the Lord, even though I didn't have a personal relationship with Jesus at that point, but God's hand was on me. I've always known that God existed. I always believed that Jesus was my was the Savior of the world. And even my thought, he's mine, I'm a Christian, I would say that. But I had, at that point, not allowed him to be the Lord and Savior of my life. So, but, each one of us has inside of us the innate knowledge that God's placed there, the difference between right and wrong.
Right.
We have a conscience. And immediately I was convicted. And I said, I can't do this. I'm not going to do this. It did continue because he did keep pressing, and I was lonely still. But at one point, I just couldn't do this anymore, and I told him, I'm not doing this anymore. And I ended it, but not before I was pregnant. And it was too late. And then there's consequences. You make a bad decision, and there's always consequence. Now, God can ease the consequences according to his plan, but in my situation, he didn't. There was no easing this, and back then, to have an abortion was illegal, and I, just needed to come to terms with it, deal with it, let my parents know what was going on, and I didn't tell anybody for 5 months.
So for 5 months, you hid your pregnancy.
Yes.
You're 16 years old.
I'm 16.
And you know that you have to tell your parents because eventually you're going to start showing, and it's going to tell themselves. And so how was it to have to, sit down with your mom and say, Mom, look, I need to talk to you?
Well, I actually didn't do that. She noticed that I wasn't asking for certain things.
Right.
And it was quite obvious that I was avoiding the subjects of things, and I was so upset with myself and the circumstance I found myself in that I was angry and snippy, and that wasn't like me, so she knew something was wrong. So she used the excuse that school was starting to take me to get a physical. She never took me to get a physical, ever. So I knew this was D-Day. And so I had to come to terms with that. Today was the day she was going to find out that I was pregnant.
Well, Janice, let's take a commercial break, and we'll come back and find out how the decisions you made affected the choices in your life when we return.
Today, girls will die as a result of drug overdose, domestic violence, and even suicide. It doesn't have to end like this. There is hope. A Door of Hope provides free services to girls and women who are stuck in a vicious cycle. If you or someone you know needs help, call today, 225-665-HOPE, or visit our website at adoreofhopela.com.
Welcome back to Keeping It Real. We are here with Janice Maxwell, and she is here sharing her story of how when she was 16 years old, she found herself pregnant. She hid her pregnancy for 5 months, and during that time, abortion was illegal. So now she has to make a decision. Is she going to keep, or is she going to place in adoption? And so, Janice, what was her decision?
Well, my mom wasn't sure what to do with me once she found out, and of course my family was very hurt, and so she asked for advice from an attorney, and he says, well, usually girls who are unwed go to these unwed mothers' homes. And image was very important to my mom. Her reputation was very important, so it was a way for her to get me out of sight and to deal with whatever I decided to do. And she didn't encourage me to keep the baby. My dad told me whatever I decided that he would support me in it. And so for the next 4 months, and which seemed like I was only pregnant 4 months because I'd pretended for 5 months that I wasn't, and then once everyone knew, then I started showing and I began to look pregnant and all the things that went along with that. So I did go to the home. They had counselors from the county, from Children's Services come and speak with me and tell me my options. And they were also encouraging me. I guess, it almost felt like pressured. You should give up the baby. You don't have a good home life. But I'd already been thinking about those things. And when I found out I was pregnant and finally my parents knew and my sister knew and they were all kind of supporting me some, especially my sister, I also spent most of my time in my room praying and reading my Bible and asking God what to do. And I knew I couldn't make the decision to do something this important without him, telling me what to do. And it wasn't that he spoke to me and said, you should, have this baby and give it up for adoption. But I was clearly seeing my options. And at 16, I had school to finish. I didn't know how in the world I would support a baby at this age. And I didn't want to bring my baby home to the life that I'd been living by the time he was born, was 17 years, with my parents and my dad's alcoholism. I just didn't want to traipse him all over the country, like they had done me. And so during that time, I was praying and really asking God for wisdom, and felt like I should give him up for adoption, which is a very difficult thing to do. Because, they tell you, it says, oh, no one will ever know you were pregnant. Just don't tell them. You're so young, your body will bounce back. Nobody will be able to look at you and say, oh, well, she's had a baby. You can keep that to yourself. But I didn't want to forget. And they were saying, just don't think about it. Don't talk about it. Don't tell anybody. But and then when you have the baby, which I went to the hospital and had him on in December, they were saying, don't hold the baby. Don't do. Of course, I couldn't. He was early, so he was in the neonatal unit, and I couldn't go in there and hold him. And probably could have. But I was a kid, and I didn't know I could ask, demand my rights or whatever, But I did look at him through the window and stood there for about 45 minutes weeping because I'd made the decision, to give him up for adoption. I didn't know if I could do it, but I did.
Can I tell you, Janice, that adoption is one of the most selfless, loving things that any woman can do to give that baby a life. When they're not in a place, you gave him life, and you placed him with a family that maybe couldn't have children, I know that there are places, I know a local place even here, Uplift, and they help moms, they help children that are being adopted, they help them through the process, and they're faith-based, they're a Christian couple that has their own personal story, and so it really is a selfless choice.
Yeah, I look at it that way at that point in my life. I was just knew I wanted the best for him. And at that point, in that 4 months period when I was considering it and made the decision of it, I began to pray that he would have a Christian home, and that he would have parents that would lead him to Jesus. And I prayed, that God would protect him. And when I gave him up, they weren't taking him from me. I said, here, although I couldn't physically hand him off to them, I did it emotionally and with what faith I had at that point in my life. But I did begin to pray for him at that time. And so, I signed the papers, and I believe, and then I found out things, later on, but through all this time, shortly after he was born, actually, I met my husband. And 3 months later, I was a married woman. And then a year and a half later, we had started our family, and we had 3 more sons. And we had a really lovely family, you know, that I gave my heart to the Lord when I was 22, and after 5 years of marriage, and all through this time, I'm praying, Lord, you know, on his birthday, his birthday always comes, and I didn't talk about it a lot because I didn't want what I had done to taint what the Lord had given me, and I didn't want Larry, my husband, and my children to be. She's always talking about somebody else who's not here, and I wanted my focus to be on my family.
Did you find yourself living a life of guilt in a way because you had your children there that you kept, and then you had the one son that, like you said, it was your choice to give him away? So did guilt come up on you?
Oh, there was times that I felt that way, yeah, and wondered why I did it. Maybe if I'd have kept him, then Larry and I'd have had 4 boys, but that wasn't God's plan. And by the time I gave my heart to the Lord, I had totally surrendered my son. I named him Daniel, by the way, and Daniel means God is my judge. And I named him that on purpose because no one could judge him or me but God. And that's why I named him that.
That's powerful.
So, you know, you speak a name over a child, you know, and
names have meaning.
Names have meaning. That's
right.
Yes, names have meaning. So.
Well, Janice, we're going to take another commercial break, and we'll come back and listen to the rest of your story when we return.
I'm Pastor Philip Pimlott, and this is my wife Kelly, and we want to extend a special invitation for you to come and visit us at Heartsease Family Life Church. Heartsease is a safe place for you and your family, a place where life starts, love happens, and purpose is revealed.
Our church is located at 12112 Florida Boulevard, and our services are Sunday mornings at 9 and 11 and Wednesday evenings at 6:45.
For more information, check out our website, hflc.us. Welcome home.
Welcome back to Keeping It Real. We are here with Janice, and she is sharing her story, her adoption story, which we've all been crying. Just even on the break, we've been crying because you gave your heart to the Lord. You totally surrendered and came to a place, and over the years, you prayed for your son. Yes. You prayed for him when his birthday would come. You would pray for him.
Yes.
And so one day, the phone rings.
Yes. I'd been looking for him as much as it was possible in a closed adoption, and it wasn't really possible. When he turned 21, Georgia had passed a law that once a child reached adult age, they could start looking if they wanted to. But I was warned that boys rarely did, so don't get my hopes up. But my hope was in the Lord.
Yes.
And I kept saying, Father, I want to meet my son in this life, but if I don't, please save him so I can meet him in heaven. And that was my prayer all those years. And I did pray for him on his birthdays, ask for blessings, protection, that kind of thing. Pray that, you know, for his wife, you know, that the Lord would bring the right person into his life. And then in 2003, I had said, I just want to meet him. And my husband had encouraged me to let go and let God do it if it was his plan. And I relinquished it. And then one night in 2004, about a year later, I came home from work and I answered the phone, and this voice said, asked for me, and I said, this is she. And he said, my name's Michael Tanner, and I have a couple questions I need to ask you. And I went, okay, I'm thinking salesperson.
Right.
And I'd just come in from work, and I was waiting for our prayer group to come for that night. And so I had a minute or two I could talk. And he said, I've got a document in my possession that has a name on it marked through with ink, but we could make it out. And it says, I just wonder if the name Daniel means anything to you. That's what I did. I went, yes. And he said, and my birthday is 12/3/69. Does that mean anything to you? And I went, And then he asked me if I knew how much he weighed. And I said, yes. I said, you weigh 4 pounds and 5 ounces. And he said, why? And I said, because you were early. He said, I think I'm your son. And I was on the floor crying at that point. And I said, Lord, thank you, Lord, thank you, Lord. And I said, how did you find me? He says, well, you signed up on a registry online. And I looked, and it pulled up your information. And he said, I'm on my way home from work. Would it be okay to stop and meet you? And I said, yes, absolutely. He says, okay, I'll be there about 30 minutes. Let me tell you, you went from 0 to your stomach's in a knot, and you're walking around the house going, I'm going to meet my son in 30 minutes. I can't believe it.
You had a suddenly.
Yeah, suddenly, yes. And he came, when he got there, I was so nervous, I couldn't even go to the door. And my husband went to the door. And he went from when we first got married to, I probably wouldn't have dated you if you'd had a baby, because I talked to him about if I'd had kept him, would he have been his dad? To he opens the door and Michael puts his hand in to introduce himself, and Larry takes his hand and pulls him into total acceptance. And he actually had called the house before I got home and talked to Larry. He didn't tell me, he wanted me to be surprised. And he asked the same questions to Larry, and Larry told him what little bit he knew. And then he says, we've been looking for you a long time. That's what he told Michael. And so we were getting ready to have our Bible study that night, and our son Ryan and his wife were a part of that, and they came in right behind him, and he's going, oh, good, somebody new for Bible study. And I turned him around and I said, Ryan, I want you to meet your brother Michael. So everybody's crying now. And we sat, it was a wonderful time. We spent like 3 or 4 hours just sharing and talking. And I said, we all, Becky, my daughter-in-law said, so how did you find Mom? How'd you find her? And he said, well, I went on this, he said, I looked 6 years ago, but she wasn't online. And that was before I had a computer. And when I got a computer, my daughter-in-law Becky, had started sending me email addresses. Sign up on this registry, sign up on this registry. So I did, and forgot where they were and what I signed up on,
Right.
And he just typed in adoption. He'd been talking with his other adoptive brother during the day, and he was always saying, I want to find my mom, I want to find my mom. Michael was content. He didn't really need to find me, he thought. And so he went online and he typed in his information and pulled up the match in 2 minutes. There I was in front of him, and he went, we live 2.7 miles from each other off the same road.
Off the same road.
And had lived there. We moved to Loganville. He'd moved there 10 years earlier with his family, and we moved there a year before. And my husband, the interesting thing, my husband had believed that the house that we bought in Loganville was God. And he claimed it, kept going over there and praying over it, so that it was our house.
Right.
And it was, we got it, miraculously we got it with all the details, and then we lived just less than 3 miles away from Michael and his family.
And I know when I was in Atlanta and you shared your story, one of the things you said, one of the very first questions he asked you was,
Yes. Do you know Jesus?
Yes.
And I said, yes, do you? And he said yes.
God had answered every one of your
Yes,
prayers.
every one of my prayers. And he was a part of the worship team in his church, and he has a lovely voice. He sings.
He sings for the Lord.
Yes, he sings for the Lord. And that really blessed me to know that about him, So it's just been a wonderful reunion. Just a wonderful, wonderful reunion.
So sometimes when God has a plan, it may not be what we think.
Right.
But he has a plan. He had a plan.
Yes.
And once you relinquished it and you surrendered complete control, it was only a year later.
It was only a year later.
That he contacted you. And also, you had started off saying that your dad had suffered from just a terrible alcohol problem that really interfered with your home life. Tell us what happened with your dad.
Well, it was shortly after I had gotten saved, and he had gone away from my mom. They'd split up again and gone down to Atlanta, and he went on a week-long binge, and some guy he met up with kept calling me and telling me, you should come get him. I think he's sick. I think he's dying. And my husband said, whatever you decide, I'll support you. And I just kept praying and saying, Lord, what do I do? What do I do? And he said, he didn't really say anything to me. I just was asking him, and then I just relinquish him. I relinquish him and that next day, he went to leave, and he turned around, and when he turned the car around and came back, he was completely delivered from alcohol. Never drank again. Matter of fact, it smelled so bad he didn't even want to be around it.
Never drank again.
Never drank again.
And I don't know if you're watching today. I don't know what your struggle is. You may be struggling with a crisis pregnancy or an unplanned pregnancy. You may be the mother of a 16-year-old daughter that may be going through a similar situation. But we want you to know that there are places that can help. A Door of Hope is one of them. That number is 225-665-HOPE. And there are people that are waiting to pray with you. Also, Uplift Adoption. They are a nonprofit organization right here, very local, and their number is also going to be on the screen. Maybe you have some questions. Maybe you need prayer. We want you to know that you're not alone. We are here for you. Shauna?
I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story, for being so open with us. And I want you to know that God is a God of restoration. He can restore no matter how many years of trauma, of brokenness you've had in your life. God is a God of restoration. So if you or someone you know have an inspiring story like Janice had, please call us and share it with us. Until next time, bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Do you have a story? Send your personal story to info@adoreofhopela.com for a chance to be selected as a guest on the morning talk show, Keeping It Real.
Hi, I'm Kristen Maddox.
And I'm Shauna Butler.
And I'm Louise Cook.
And Louise is the financial director at A Door of Hope Ministries. Every day at A Door of Hope, we have the opportunity to provide free services to girls and women that are struggling with various crises, various traumas in their life. And we cannot do this without the support of people in our community like you. You have the opportunity today to help us continue to provide these services at no charge to the girls. We cannot do it without you.
And like Kristen said, the services are free, but of course it does cost the Door of Hope in order for us to stay open. And so we do need your pledges. You know, every pledge is going to help some young lady to be able to heal, to be able to get over those life-controlling issues that they've been through. And that's our mission here at A Door of Hope Ministries.
And this is what we offer to you. You could pay through the Angel of Hope Fund. You could also do PayPal, credit card, or simply mail in your check. And also go on our website. That's another place you can give. And we thank you for your help.
I just want to ask you a question. How much is her life worth? Priceless, right? What if she was your mother, your sister, or even your daughter? You have the opportunity to help us make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you.
Today's closed caption sponsor is AutoYes. Who makes your wallet smile? Thank you to our sponsors. If you'd like to help sponsor the show Keeping It Real, please call 225-665-4673. That's 225-665-4673.